Welcome to the Rap Soul Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of music that moves our hearts and gets our feet tapping. This is the intersection of rap and soul music from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. We appreciate you for listening. Share this podcast with a friend or family member who loves music as much as you do. The podcast is hosted by 12 Kyle. Next up, the Rap Soul Podcast.
Because there are some very, very distinct hip hop logos that we've seen over the years growing up that automatically you know what it is, and they're very, shall I say, iconic, if you will. So what I did was I compiled a list of some of the most impressive and iconic hip hop logos. Now, they're in no particular order. The only thing I did was separate them from the record labels and the artists. Again, be clear. I'm not ranking any of these. I jotted some down. And it all came on the heels of me picking out this shirt that I put on as far as the marathon is concerned. Welcome to another edition of the Rap Soul Podcast. I am your boy 12 Kyle. I want to thank you all for tuning in as you do each and every week. Again, this is the Rap Soul Podcast. This is the place where we have discussions about music and artists from the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s when it comes to rap, hip hop, soul, and R&B. Simply put, folks, this is the best music podcast that you have never heard until right now. Again, I want to thank you all for tuning in. Shout out to those of you who are watching on YouTube as well as Spotify. Okay, check this out. So today I was looking for something to put on. At the time of this recording, it's relatively cold outside, so I knew I wasn't going to be going outside. So I said, well, let me grab a shirt, a t-shirt, if you will. And I go to grab a t-shirt and I grab a shirt that I just recently purchased. And if you're watching on YouTube and Spotify, you can see that the shirt that I have on reads The Marathon. Now, you may or may not know that The Marathon is a brand that was started by the late Nipsey Hussle, one of my favorite rappers, period. And so in support of Nipsey and his brand, I purchased a few shirts online. And so I have a few, along with obviously his music. But the thing that stood out to me was when I grabbed the shirt, I remembered something that I heard someone from Nipsey's camp talk about a few years ago in a documentary. And they talked about how in the logo of the marathon, and you can see it here on the shirt, it's red in the background, white letters, and they're, block letters, and it reads The Marathon. Also, a part of his brand is Crenshaw, which represents the area that he's from, Crenshaw and Slauson, that area and section of Los Angeles. So what it got me to thinking about was this logo is pretty popular. The Marathon logo is very popular. The Crenshaw logo is very popular. When you see it, you know who it is immediately. You don't have to necessarily be from South Central Los Angeles to have Crenshaw a paraphernalia on and people know what it represents. And so it got me to thinking about some hip hop logos, right? Because there are some very, very distinct hip hop logos that we've seen over the years growing up that automatically you know what it is, and they're very, shall I say, iconic, if you will. So what I did was I compiled a list of some of the most impressive and iconic hip hop logos. Now, they're in no particular order. The only thing I did was separate them from the record labels and the artists. And I'm not ranking them. These are just some that just came to mind that I jotted down. If I forgot a few or if I forgot your favorite one, don't get mad. Please don't get mad. It charge it to my heart. It's okay. So without further ado, let me give you some hip hop logos, some very iconic hip hop logos. First up, again, in no particular order, Def Jam Recordings. Now, I want to say this is probably the first hip hop logo that I actually remember. Def Jam Recordings is for, obviously the label Def Jam. And Def Jam, to my knowledge, was the first rap label in the mid 80s. And what was interesting about Def Jam was that it came at a time where for people like me who were very young, I was gravitating towards this thing called rap. And Def Jam seemed to be, at least to me, the hub of where everything that was popping was popping. If you were on Def Jam, you were somebody. And so whether it be LL Cool J or Public Enemy or the Beastie Boys, it appeared to me from afar in my house in Florence, South Carolina, far, far away from New York City, that Def Jam was a movement and a huge label for rap. Because again, it wasn't even called hip hop at the time; it was rap. But a very iconic logo. Of course, you see the reading of the writing of the name Def Jam Recordings, and then that record needle. That record needle is very important because it symbolizes what you were getting from Def Jam Recordings. So it didn't say Def Jam Entertainment, it didn't say Def Jam Records, it said Def Jam Recordings. And that was the label that, in a lot of ways, propelled rap to the highest levels that it could go. So that's one. Um, Number two, again, no order. Bad Boy Entertainment. That's right. Bad Boy. um, what can I say? That logo is very recognizable, very famous. It is a little boy, a little baby, and he's got Tim's on, and with the black background and the white lettering, it is something that always to me stood out. Um, Now, obviously, when you think about Bad Boy, it's gonna be synonymous with its founder, and that's Puff Daddy, or Puff, as I call him. Bad Boy Entertainment was founded by Puff and run by Puff. And, you know, they had a run. Regardless of what you think about Puff, regardless of the fact that Puff is now serving time in jail for a bunch of foolishness that he did on his own, and you could make a case that he probably could be serving a longer time than the time that he's been given. Um, Nonetheless, Bad Boy itself and its run uh, changed the game. They were very pivotal in hip hop. Uh, you could make a case that they helped bring the music and the hip hop back to the East Coast because at the time that they were making their way, the West Coast had it in a stranglehold. Um, but again, you know, I'm not a fan of Puffs. Never really been a fan of Puffs. Huge fan of Biggie, and Biggie was an integral part of Bad Boy. And there are a lot of people who say that, you know, Bad Boy's decline started at the murder of the Notorious B.I.G. And you can make a case that it did. But nonetheless, I think that logo is iconic and it definitely is worthy of being talked about on this particular episode. Number three. Now, you can't mention Bad Boy without mentioning Death Row Records. Again, run by none other than Marion Suge Knight, um, who's also doing time. uh, I don't know how much time Suge got, but he's going to be in there for a while. Nonetheless, regardless, you know, much like Puff, regardless of what you think about Suge, um, Death Row was a huge movement. Death Row Records, again, run by Suge Knight. You know, it had the likes of Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, the Dog Pound, and so many others. They had their run of hip hop was you really can't even measure it. They really laid a huge foundation for West Coast hip hop, and they took it from the East and took it to the West. I mean, let's just be honest. If you were outside back then, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Um, but that label and its music coincided with a time that I really, really fell in love with West Coast hip hop. So I had all the albums, and I thoroughly enjoyed all of them. But um, you can't diminish their dominance in the '90s and the 2000s, and you can't diminish Suge Knight's contribution and Death Row Records' contribution to what it did to the game. So again, salute to Death Row. Um, Coming in at number 4, No Limit Records. Now that logo is very iconic because of the gold and platinum tank. You would see the gold tank, and it was you saw it on the emblems that a lot of the members who were members of No Limit would wear. And of course, it's run by none other than Percy Miller, aka Master P. P did his thing. I mean, when you talk about a legend who carved, a huge path for not just himself and his label, but other Southern acts to follow. Um, yeah, it gets no better than the Tank. And that Tank, during their run, that Tank was rolling. And powered by their production team of Beats by the Pound, you'd be hard pressed to find a bigger and stronger label, and that logo was a part of it. Everybody knew about the Tank, and again, the Tank couldn't be stopped. And even to this day, the Tank is still rolling. So shout out to Master P and everybody at No Limit. Um, then the next logo that we have is Loud Records. Loud Records, particularly for those of you who, like me, came up through the 90s, Loud Records was very important because Loud Records gave us not only some of the most popular acts, but it also gave us like a lot of underground acts. And I, for one, really appreciated Loud Records. Um, I think Loud Records probably doesn't get the recognition that, Bad Boy or, Death Row does, and they should, because Loud had a stretch, again, where there are artists like Wu-Tang on there that were great, and they did a great job as far as promoting not only rap, but their label as well as their artists. So I have no problem with Loud Records. I love the logo. The logo is the word loud spelled out, and then their headphones that that encompass the word loud. So yeah, Loud Records definitely is one of those iconic logos in hip hop. Another record label that was very iconic with a very iconic um, logo was Raucous Records. Now it just says Raucous on the on the logo, but it is a razor blade. And I guess the meaning of that was that they wanted people to see that Raucous was producing artists who were razor sharp with their tongues and their business. And yeah, Rawkus was, if you were outside in the '90s and were tapped into East Coast hip hop, New York City hip hop, Rawkus was the thing. And again, a lot of underground artists as well. And I know that there's a couple of documentaries. I've seen bits and pieces of one, um, but I'd be interested in to hearing about Rawkus's start and then its demise as well. But again, very, very iconic logo. I mean, you can't get much edgier than a razor blade. And right now it's time for us to take a quick commercial break. On the other side of the break, I've given you the labels. Now I'm going to give you some hip hop artists who have iconic hip hop logos. Sit tight. We'll be back in just a second. And we are back. Once again, it's your boy 12 Kyle. This is the Rap Soul Podcast, and we're talking about hip hop logos, some of the most iconic hip hop logos. Now, before the break, I told you a few that were, logos from the actual labels. Now we're going to tap into some from the hip hop artists. And again, they're in no particular order and they're not being ranked. So let's get to it. First up, Naughty by Nature. I absolutely love this logo. This logo in the early 90s was everything. Naughty by Nature, obviously the group from New Jersey, um, Tretch, Vinny, and KG. Shout out to those boys. Um, Iconic logo with the name Naughty by Nature written out and the baseball bat. And what was interesting was, like, if you saw those guys perform, either Tretch or Vinny would come out with a baseball bat. Like, that was a part of their logo. And Naughty by Nature was actually one of the first artists that I can remember who had not only, an iconic brand, but they also started to get into merchandise. They had Naughty by Nature boxers. They had Naughty by Nature bed sheets. I mean, I don't know how many people would want some Naughty by Nature bed sheets, but they were a thing. They had clothing line as well. So it was something that people, at least from my memory, could rock to, and you would see people outside with Naughty by Nature T-shirts and stuff like that. So shout out to them because they were one of the first, not the first, but they were one of the first to head up that movement. Um, Next up, right here in the ATL where I live, none other than OutKast. Now, OutKast's logo is iconic. I love it. It is in the shape of a Cadillac grill, uh, with a crown on the top with the word outcast spelled out, OUTKAST. Um, Listen, when you saw that logo back in 1994, 95, it was everything because, and I've said it on this podcast numerous of times, one of my favorite groups of all time. Outkast was different for me because they represented for the South, and more specifically, they represented for, um, you know, kids like me who look like me, they walk like me, they talk like me, they did the type of things that I like to do, and it was just a breath of fresh air to see that on a national stage. And they didn't compromise and try to sound like they were from New York or try to be, like they were from someplace that they weren't. And they were genuinely authentic and the music reflected it. And that logo, listen, you'd be hard pressed, even to this day, you'd be hard pressed to walk around anywhere in Atlanta and not see that logo. And I have an Outcast t-shirt. Oh, I actually have a couple of Outcast t-shirts, and anytime I wear my Outcast t-shirt outside, it always strikes up a conversation. I can go to the grocery store, and there'll be somebody that'll say, "Man, I like that shirt. Man, what's your favorite Outcast album?" People literally will ask you that if they see an Outcast t-shirt on, especially if they're a fan. And so when you wear the Outcast t-shirt, you let them, or clothing, you let people know that, hey, I'm a fan. And most Outcast fans recognize another Outcast fan. So it's always a cool vibe when I rock Outcast gear. Um, Number three, EPMD, which stands for Eric and Parrish Making Dollars, Eric Sermon, Parrish Smith. These guys came out in 1988. Um, One of the best duos in hip hop history. Uh, I love this logo. Um, it's interesting because of it's you got the E, you got the P, and then you have the blocks above it and below it. And then the colors obviously stand out in black and orange. Um, but I love that logo, and it's always been a staple, like I said, since 1988. Um, and what was interesting was I think when they first came out, when the first single dropped on the record label, it was spelled out EPEEMD. And they figured out, okay, well, we have to shorten this. And so they went back to the drawing board and I guess and just said, okay, well, hey, we'll just make it EPMD. And to be honest, it stuck. But this is one of the dopest groups that you can listen to. They're still out here rocking and still kicking and making music. Shout out to Eric Sermon again. Shout out to Parrish Smith, Eric and Parrish making dollars. EPMD, iconic hip hop logo. Um, Next up, one of the greatest MCs, period. My man Nas, aka Nasir Jones. But Nas's logo is very simple, but very dope. If you've seen the Nas logo, you know exactly what it looks like. It's a capital N, lowercase a, and then a capital S. And what's interesting was I remember the first time that I saw it spelled out like that. And I don't think Nas had this logo when he initially came out. I think it was something that he got, I guess further down the line he got to it and said, okay, I'm going to use this going forward. But the first time that I saw the logo, after that, every time I would spell out his name, I would spell it out just the way that it looks on his logo. Capital N, lowercase a, capital S. I think it's dope. And it's, in a script, I think it's a really, really dope logo. Again, Nas, it doesn't matter where you rank him, he's one of the greatest MCs to ever pick up a microphone. So yeah, that logo is definitely, definitely special. Um, Next up, the iconic De La Soul. Man, shout out to De La Soul. Uh, Rest in peace. Dave recently passed away. Um, and shout out to that latest album, Cabinet in the Sky. If you have not heard Cabinet in the Sky, do yourself a favor. When you finish listening to this episode, go listen to Cabin in the Sky. One of the best albums out. Um, but yeah, that logo, De La Soul spelled out in pink letters, and then you have the O of the word soul. There's a peace sign in it, and really represented what De La Soul was about. We used to call it the Daisy era. Um, De La Soul was just different. Like they were really on some weird. I don't. People tried to say like they were hippies. They weren't hippies. They were just different. They weren't gangster. They weren't tough guys. They were some dudes that believed in making good music, and they could rap and they could entertain us, and they had skits that were just outright hilarious, even still funny to this day. So yeah, I'm rocking with De La Soul all the time, man. Shout out to De La Soul again, iconic hip hop logo. Um, Now, these next couple of logos, I'll be honest, if you were going to rank them, they were probably going to fall in the top five. Again, I'm not ranking them, but these hip hop logos are iconic and they are synonymous with greatness. Uh, First up, A Tribe Called Quest, the Stickmen. Um, Listen, as far back as I can remember, that logo was there. And I remember seeing it for the first time in what, 1989, 89, 90. Um, and I think was it the El Segundo? It might have been the Left My Wallet in the El Segundo video. I think that may have been the first time. Either that or Can I Kick It? Yes, you can. um, but yeah, the Stickmen in that logo forever. And it was green and red, and it just represented A Tribe Called Quest. Rest in peace to Fife. Shout out to Q-Tip, Jerobi, Ali Shaheed Muhammad. Um, yeah, man, definitely iconic, iconic, iconic. Um, Next up, again, no particular order. This may be the first logo that I can actually remember because I don't know if there was anybody that had a bigger logo at that particular time in hip hop. And I'm talking about back in 1984, 85. It was none other than Run DMC. That logo is synonymous not only with Run DMC, but it's synonymous with hip hop. And you can make a case that it is the biggest logo in hip hop, and that is none other than Run DMC. You can make a case that it is with the red blocks, the white letters, and the black background. Man, Run DMC is tough. That logo is something else. It is something to behold. Um, Next up, Public Enemy. Man, listen, Public Enemy's logo is a man who is caught in the crosshairs of what is potentially about to be a shot. And what's interesting is I did not realize until recently, like literally a couple of weeks ago, at the time of his passing, my man E Love from LL Cool J's camp, that is E Love in the crosshair. And again, shout out to E Love, rest in peace. It wasn't until he passed that I realized that it was him. I saw, tributes to him being poured out on social media. And all these years I never knew it was E Love. And when I saw it, I was like, yeah, that's E Love. um, but yeah, that logo is iconic. Public Enemy, one of the greatest hip hop groups of all time. And what's interesting was like, and a lot of you don't know this, but when I first got on social media, I had a blog, and when I first got on Twitter, um, before I used any personal pictures, that was my logo. It was the Public Enemy logo because I really felt like at that time, Public Enemy and that particular logo represented where we were as a people, where we were as black men. We were in the crosshairs of, you know, a lot of bad things that were happening, and I felt like that logo really represented what I thought um, about what was going on. And I still love that logo to this day. There may not be a bigger or more iconic logo than the man in the crosshairs, which is E Love from Public Enemy. So again, shout out to PE, yeah, iconic logo. And last but not least, again, you could make the case that this is probably the most iconic hip hop logo, and that is none other than Wu Tang Clan. Um, Listen, man, i- when you see that W, you know who it is. You could take Wu Tang out of this, and if I just showed you that W, you'd automatically, if you see a black shirt with a yellow W, you know it's Wu Tang. And in this case, the W looks it looks like a W, but it looks like it also could be something else. And if you're a fan of Wu Tang, you know they were influenced by Kung Fu. So yeah, it looks like it could be something else, but it is a W, and the word Wu Tang is spelled out in the middle. Iconic. I mean, again, you could take the word Wu Tang out, and if you show somebody that W, they'd know exactly who it was. And so, yeah, I think that is probably one of the most iconic hip hop logos ever. Again, be clear. I'm not ranking any of these. I jotted some down. And it all came on the heels of me picking out this shirt that I put on as far as the marathon is concerned. Um, so, again, shout out to Nipsey Hussle, rest in peace. Shout out to everybody that I named from Def Jam Recordings, Bad Boy Entertainment, Death Row Records, The Tank, No Limit, not No Limit Soldiers, No Limit Records, Loud Records, Raucous Records, and the artists Naughty by Nature, OutKast, EPMD, Nas, De La Soul, A Tribe Called Quest, Run DMC, Public Enemy, and Wu Tang. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the Rap Soul Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We drop new episodes weekly. If you'd like to contribute to the podcast financially, hit us up on Cash App, $ TWELVEKYLE. Be sure to subscribe, and more importantly, share this podcast episode with a friend or family member who loves music as much as you do. Again, that's going to do it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I am your boy 12 Kyle. I will catch you guys next time. 5,000. Yeah.
Thank you for listening. This concludes the episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Rap Soul Podcast. You can find the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Follow the podcast on social media. And feel free to continue this discussion on our Reddit page. More importantly, share this podcast with a friend or family member who loves music as much as you do. Until next time, 5,000.